What's going on, guys? It's Crash Out MMA, back with another video. Today we're going to be doing my predictions for UFC 313. I'm probably a little bit late, it's happening in 2 days, but I figured I should probably get it out today rather than tomorrow. This is a pretty stacked card, so yeah, there's not as much in the way of like ranked fights or anything, but there is a lot of good prospects and stuff on here. So there's a lot of interesting fights for me to talk about. And I'm going to have some hot takes on predictions here too. But let's start with early prelims. First fight of the card, Jordan Santos versus Ozzy Diaz. I think Jordan Santos should get a pretty easy KO here. I don't think Ozzy Diaz's chin is that great, and I think Jordan Santos has a lot of power. I think he's more athletic. I just never really thought Ozzy Diaz was all that good. It's kind of funny they haven't put his height in or anything like that yet. But overall, I do think that Ozzy Diaz probably isn't going to be able to do much to Jordan Santos. I think Jordan Santos' striking is better. He has more power, better like fundamentals. I don't honestly think that Ozzy Diaz is going to be able to do much in this matchup because I feel like Jordan Santos is just going to be in his face a lot, and I don't know. I just think Jordan Santos is going to knock him out pretty easily. I'll go round one. Just like I'm a little bit high on this guy right now. You could say recency bias because he's only really had one professional MMA fight, but I think he's very good. Moving on, Chris Gutierrez versus John Castaneda. I've been trying to wrap my head around why John Castaneda is the favorite in this matchup, but I'm going to pick Chris Gutierrez. Like, they have similar grappling levels, but Chris Gutierrez just has objectively better striking. Um, I think his fundamentals are better. I think he doesn't, get hit as much as John Castaneda does. And I think since they have similar sort of grappling levels, I think this will be a very striking heavy matchup. I don't think it's going to be as much grappling of a factor. I think the striking is going to be probably 90% of the fight. And because of that, I think I just have to pick Chris Gutierrez because I just think he's slightly better everywhere in striking. John Castaneda isn't terrible, but I think Chris Gutierrez will just be able to beat him at range, and I just feel like he'll be able to get it done there. So, I mean, I think it's if the grappling is like a heavy part of it, it might be different, but the way I see it is that Chris Gutierrez is just going to sort of win maybe like a 29-28 decision on the feet by just, picking apart John Castaneda, landing slightly more, and, just having like a competitive fight, but just doing a little bit more on the feet. Moving on, Myron Santos versus Francis Marshall. I'm going to go with Myron Santos. I think his last win was very good for, you know, the brutal knockout, and obviously he won the Ultimate Fighter, which obviously doesn't mean that much anymore, but I still think he's a very good fighter. And Francis Marshall, I was never really that high on. Like, he's good. I just never thought, like, watch this guy fight and was like, wow, he's next level or anything. And I think Marin Santos is a really good prospect, and I think he's actually very skilled. So I could definitely see him winning this fight. As for how I'm picking him to win, I think I'll pick him by late TKO, maybe round three. I could definitely see him hurting Francis Marshall with a big shot and then finishing him, when he's rocked. That's a potential. And Francis Marshall low key could kind of take him to decision here. If that happens, I don't think he beats Myron Santos either. I think Myron still wins the decision there. But my pick is probably going to be third round TKO by Myron Santos because I could just see him having like a somewhat competitive fight first two rounds and then hurting him late, like round three or late round two, and then finishing him from there. So I'll go Myron Santos here. Alex Morono versus Carlos Leal. I'm gonna pick Carlos Leal. I think he just is gonna be better than Alex Morono. Alex Morono's at a point where I just think he's way past his prime, and I honestly don't know if he should really be fighting that much anymore. Respect to the guy, he's all right, but I just think he's slow. Like you can tell he's not super explosive when you watch him fight, and I just feel like these more athletic or younger guys are just going to be able to beat him every fight that he has coming up. Carlos Leal is in his prime. He's 30 years old. Alex Morono is getting old at this point. And Carlos Leal, I just think, is better everywhere. I think he has better grappling and better defensive grappling, especially. And I think on the feet, he's has much more power. He's much faster. And I think Alex Morono has some fundamentals, but I think he's just going to get taken advantage of on the feet by anybody at this point who has a lot of power, or even anybody who just has similar striking skills to him but is just faster, higher output. I think Alex Morono is a little bit plotty at this point, and I could even see Carlos Leal finishing him, like knocking him out. Honestly, I'm going to pick Carlos Leal by decision here because I think Alex Morono could potentially, make it a little bit harder for him than some people expect and take him to decision. But I think even if it does go to decision, Carlos Leal is going to pretty easily beat him every round on the feet, just because I don't see the grappling coming into account here. So I'm gonna go with the heavy favorite and pick Carlos Leal to win via 30-27 decision. I could see him knocking out Alex Morono, but I'm gonna say Alex Morono uses experience and is able to survive all 3 rounds. I could definitely see that. But Alex Morono, if he loses this fight, probably needs to retire because I don't know really what else is left for him. He's kind of just going to be floating in the current position that he's at right now, winning some and losing some, basically just fighting for a paycheck. Carlos Leal, though, I think he's definitely very good. If he wins this fight, then he'll, be coming off of a win. Obviously, his first fight he lost to Rinat Fakhretdinov, which that he's a very good fighter, so you can't even really blame him. He took him to decision, but I think if he gets a win over Alex Morono, he'll definitely have a bright future in the welterweight division. But moving on to the next fight, Bruno Ferreira versus Armen Petrosyan. I got this fight's actually a little bit hard, but I'm going to pick Bruno Ferreira here, which is why I think it's interesting that they have Armen Petrosyan as the favorite. I think Bruno Ferreira is just better. And Armen Petrosyan is good, don't get me wrong. They're both coming off of losses, so it's kind of a weird thing where either way that you pick it, they both looked not great in their last performance. But that being said, I think Bruno Ferreira's wins have just been better than Armen Petrosyan's in his performances. He has a lot of power, obviously, in the middleweight division, and he's big. I think he's a decent amount bigger than Armen Petrosyan is. Armen Petrosyan is obviously a great striker, but in this matchup, like, I don't know how Armen Petrosyan's chin is. Here's the reason I'm picking Bruno Ferreira. I could see him putting, like, his foot on the gas early and knocking out Armen Petrosyan early, which is honestly what I think is going to happen. I think Bruno Ferreira is going to knock him out in the first round. That being said, if Armen Petrosyan can make it out of that sort of early part of the fight and not get chinned, I think he beats Bruno Ferreira, because if it does go to decision, I think Armen is going to be able to land better and sort of, pick him apart a little bit more, because I know Bruno Ferreira's cardio isn't really that good, and as we see him get later into fights, he sort of like slows down. So I could definitely see Armen Petrosyan taking advantage of that. But for me personally, I think that Armen Petrosyan is the type of guy that Bruno Ferreira will be able to walk down, and I don't think Armen Petrosyan's chin is that amazing, especially compared to the power of a guy like Bruno Ferreira, who can put people out really easily, obviously with like the RoboCop knockout and all of those. So I think I'm going to pick Bruno Ferreira here to knock out Armen Petrosyan. But this is a very close fight, and I could see Armen, winning via decision if he can take Bruno Ferreira all 3 rounds, because I think as the fight builds, Armen's going to start seeing more success and landing more. But yeah, it's definitely a very close fight. I'll lean Bruno Ferreira for now, though. And then another fight that I'm really excited for on the prelims, Joshua Van versus Ray Saruya. Joshua Van is someone that I've always been a fan of at flyweight. I think he's small. He's even small for the flyweight division, which is surprising, but I think he's very good. He's a little bit of a slow starter, but his boxing is great. He has a pretty good chin. Obviously, he did get knocked out by Charles Johnson a few fights ago, but I still think he's very good. And then Ray Saruya is a very good prospect in the flyweight division. As for who I'm picking here, this fight was actually, when it first got announced, I was definitely heavily favoring Van. But then, now that it's gotten a lot closer to the fight date, I'm thinking it's a lot closer. That being said, I'm still gonna pick Joshua Van. Maybe I would pick Ray Saruya if this was right after Joshua Van lost to Charles Johnson, but he's coming off of 2 wins right now. He's got momentum, and granted, Ray Saruya could take advantage of Joshua Van early in the fight, but I could definitely see Joshua Van just pressuring forward, definitely dropping that round one. I think Ray Saruya will be able to take that, but I could see him, going forward and just outboxing him the later 2 rounds, maybe hurting him at one point, and just landing the bigger, better shots later into the fight. And will pick Joshua Van by 29-28 decision here. I think his skills, especially striking and boxing, are very good. Granted, I think Ray Saruya is very good as well, but he's also a little bit untested. We've only ever seen him have one fight in the UFC. So I think that Joshua Van is going to be able to, I guess you could say, fraud check him here. I think Joshua Van's good and Ray Saruya is good, so I don't know that it would be a fraud check necessarily, because I do think Ray Saruya would beat a lot of people lower than Joshua Van, but I think Joshua Van is very good, and really the only thing holding him back in this division is his size. He's kind of a small guy, so, I just don't think, though, that Ray Saruya, being very similar size, is going to be able to take advantage of that. He's not going to grapple, in my opinion, effectively against Joshua Van. And like I said, I think Ray Saruya is definitely going to be doing better early, but I think that Joshua Van is going to build more, and I think he's going to just get better as the fight goes on, and I don't think Ray Saruya is going to be able to finish him early. So I will pick Joshua Van here via decision, 29-28. Should be pretty clear. I could see this fight being a very close fight, and potentially, if it goes to decision, being controversial. But I'm excited to watch this. Two, top prospects for flyweight. So this will be a good fight. But moving on, this one is interesting. Curtis Blaydes versus Rizvan Kuniev. Here's the thing. I think this should be a really easy win for Curtis Blaydes. Rizvan Kuniev, I don't think, is very good. And obviously, he recently, or a couple years back, popped for PEDs, and they're giving him a top 5 heavyweight in his UFC debut, but whatever. I also think he's a lot, as you can just see by their physiques here, Curtis Blaydes just is more in shape, more athletic. I don't think Rizvan's fundamentals are that good. I think, overall, he just shouldn't win this fight. It's his debut. He's not very good. I think Curtis Blaydes is going to finish him pretty easily. I could see a ground and pound TKO, if Curtis is just wrestling him. I could see Curtis even hurting him on the feet and potentially finishing him there. I just can't really see a path to victory for Rizvan, because I think Curtis Blaydes is probably the third best heavyweight right now, aside from Volkov and Aspinall, obviously, and Jones too. But at this point, Jones is basically retired. But I think that Curtis Blaydes is just going to be much better everywhere. Plus, if you look at the guys Curtis Blaydes has lost to, they would also beat Rizvan. You know what I mean? Tom Aspinall. You're telling me you think Rizvan would also beat him? No. So I think Curtis Blaydes is just going to be more dynamic. I think his wrestling is going to pose problems to Rizvan. I think his gas tank is going to be a lot better. And I think potentially he's going to, cook him on the feet a bit too. This should be a really easy win for Curtis Blaydes, in my opinion. But I just have a feeling about this fight that it could potentially be one of those fights where a random guy making their UFC debut has a really close performance against a top guy in their division for no reason, but it just happens. But like logically, Curtis Blades should win this fight pretty easily. So I'll pick Curtis Blades via round 2 or 3 TKO. I could see, like I said, him taking down Rizvan and just sort of ground and pounding him, and I could see him hurting him on the feet and then finishing him there. Maybe they go to decision, in which case I'll still pick Blades. Like I said, he probably has better cardio, but Rizvan, I just don't see a path to victory for this guy. Moving on to the main card. This main card is pretty stacked, but we'll start off with the first fight. King Green versus Mauricio Rufy. So, this fight I've actually thought more about than I probably should have, because when it first got announced, I was going to say, okay, easy win for Mauricio Rufy. That sort of gets him into that, top prospect conversation, potentially give him some other fights against top prospects and ranked guys after he beats Bobby Green. And then I thought about it for a little bit, and I'm like, wait, Bobby Green low-key could kind of do decent in this fight. Like, looking at his boxing's pretty good, his defense is pretty good. And then I remembered, the Jalen Turner and Paddy Pimblett fights and sort of how unimpressive he looked in those fights. Like, he really didn't do much at all. And I think Mauricio Rufy reminds me a lot of the fighting style of Prime McGregor, as a lot of people get reminded of that sort of fighting style. And I honestly think that, the momentum Mauricio Rufy's going to be on is going to be enough that he's sort of going to be the more confident fighter. Obviously, Bobby Green coming off of a loss to Paddy Pimblett. Before that, he beat Jim Miller, which, that was a good win. And then before that, he obviously got brutally KO'd by Jalen Turner. And I know Bobby Green's chin is not very good, just off of the amount of times he's gotten finished. And we know Mauricio Rufy is very good with those counter punches, and he has a lot of power. I don't know how he didn't, finish the guy he fought last time early, because he had him hurt and dropped several times and hurt badly. So I think Mauricio Rufy's going to win by knockout here. I think what I could honestly see happening is a sort of boxing battle at this point where it's a little bit more competitive than people are expecting, but Mauricio Rufy just manages to land a counter and honestly flatlines Bobby Green, just because I think his power is going to be too much for Bobby Green's chin at this point in his career. I think he's a little bit too frail to be fighting a guy like Mauricio Rufy. If they had given him maybe more of a grappler or someone with less power, I would have actually considered a Bobby Green pick here, because I do think his boxing, his fundamentals, I think they're good. But I'm just, he has experience. But I'm going to go with Mauricio Rufy here, just because I think those counter left hooks that he throws and everything like that, I think if he lands one of those, it's going to be enough to put out Bobby Green. And I definitely think he'll be able to land. Anyway, moving on to the next fight, Jalen Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes. This is a really good fight, and one that I've been thinking about. But I think I'm going to pick Jalen Turner here. As much as a lot of people I know are going to be picking Ignacio Bahamondes. Granted, Ignacio Bahamondes has looked great recently, but I do think that Jalen Turner's a little bit underrated just because he's stupid. His fight against Moicano, I'm a huge Moicano fan, but he could have won that fight pretty easily if he had just gone for the finish after dropping Moicano. And I see that happen a lot where he fumbles pretty badly. Other than Moicano, loss against, Gamrot, you can't even really, blame that loss, and that was a very close fight. And he's had other losses, but I don't see Ignacio Bahamondes as the style that has beaten him before, which is just guys who are just going to pressure him and just grapple the whole time. If you look at Moicano, Gamrot, all of those guys, the only reason they were really having that much success is because they did not, stay in the striking that much. And because Jalen Turner loses a lot, people forget that his striking is actually very good. He's lethal on the feet, especially for the lightweight division being as big as he is. I could definitely see Jalen Turner chinning Ignacio Bahamondes here, just because I think Ignacio's going to stand a lot more. I think he's going to be more comfortable on the feet, especially early, and I could see Jalen Turner landing a straight right hand, or maybe even a head kick or something like that, using his long frame to his advantage and hurting Ignacio bad and putting him out. And I think especially after the Moicano loss, I think from now on, if he ever does drop or hurt somebody that bad, he's gonna make sure he takes advantage of it. I really don't see Jalen Turner making that mistake again, just because of how much that cost him in his last fight. So at UFC 300, so I think that Jalen Turner is gonna get this one done. I could definitely see Ignacio winning this. Don't get me wrong; it's a close fight, but yeah, we'll go with Jalen here. I just have a feeling that he's gonna be able to put him out on the feet, just because, like I said, people underrate Jalen's striking a lot just because of his losses and bad fight IQ. But I could see this being a more striking battle, and if Ignacio strikes too much, I could see him getting caught with something if he gets a little too comfortable. Moving on to the co-main event, this is a really good fight. Rafael Fiziev versus Justin Gaethje. So this is a rematch between them. Obviously, in the first fight, it was a very close fight, actually. It went to Justin Gaethje by majority decision. I thought Justin Gaethje won 29-28, although Fiziev could have won if he wanted to. I think he won first round pretty clearly, and then round 2 was super competitive, and then I think round 3 Gaethje kind of took over in the fight. But I think if Rafael Fiziev had maybe done more in rounds 2 and 3 just a little bit, he could have won that fight. You have to remember, it wasn't like Gaethje destroyed him in that fight, first fight against Fiziev. And you also have to remember Justin Gaethje's last fight was against Max Holloway, where he got brutally chinned. Rafael Fiziev's obviously returning from that knee injury a long time ago. So this is kind of a weird fight, because you got Justin Gaethje coming off of a really bad knockout. So his chin could be compromised. His sort of, distance management might not be as good. He might just sort of be a little bit cooked still from that. But granted, he could be recovered, but that's just a question we don't know. And then another thing, like another unknown factor, is Rafael Fiziev's coming off of a huge layoff. So he could come back and be super rusty and just sort of lose in that way and just not look as good as he has before. Or he could come back and look better than ever, since he's been training and everything. To keep a long story short, I'm going to be going with Rafael Fiziev in this fight. I know that's probably controversial because Justin Gaethje won their first fight, but you have to remember that that fight was very close, and I think the time off might help Fiziev, or if not, it'll be neutral. I don't think it's going to really hurt his game. I don't see him being all that rusty, because this isn't going to have any grappling. It's just going to be a striking battle, and we know that Rafael Fiziev's entire game is just striking. He's a very good Muay Thai fighter. So I think Gaethje coming off of that knockout might not fully be recovered, and I could see Fiziev going out there and piecing him up. And I think honestly, I'm going to pick Rafael Fiziev by decision here. I could see this fight going very similarly to their first fight, with the exception that Rafael Fiziev is just going to do more in those second and third rounds. And since there's no grappling, I think Rafael Fiziev's striking is really going to show off in this fight, especially if he made any improvements while he was away. So, could he finish Gaethje? Yes. Do I think he's going to? Not necessarily. So I'm going to pick Rafael Fiziev to beat Justin Gaethje via decision. I could see 29-28 with Gaethje winning a round 3 again. I could even potentially see Gaethje, winning the second round and then dropping the third. I think this is a very close fight, but I think Fiziev's going to be fresher. Obviously, Gaethje's coming off of the knockout. Fiziev, he's coming off of a layoff, sure, but that was just due to a knee injury, and he was looking good in the fight that he had against Gamrot before that injury happened. So I'll pick Fiziev. I think his striking is just much better as far as fundamentally. Obviously, he has very good Muay Thai. And I just think he's going to be able to beat Justin Gaethje potentially every round. So yeah, I'll go with Fiziev by decision. But moving on to the big one, the fight everybody's been anticipating for a long time. light heavyweight title fight, Magomed Ankalaev versus Alex Pereira, main event. This fight is really, really good. Obviously, I recently put a poll up on my community section with seeing what you guys wanted to pick for this fight, like who you thought was going to win. This fight I've been going back and forth on. I've always been wanting Alex Pereira to win. I don't really like Magomed just because, he doesn't really have much of a personality, and he's also not as marketable as Alex, and Alex is kind of the face of the UFC right now, so it would kind of suck if he lost just because, you know what I mean. And that would also mean he won't move up to heavyweight as quickly because he'll have to rematch Magomed and all that. But aside from that, I was always thinking Magomed might win that fight. But I was always also thinking Alex would win that fight. Now, this fight's very 50-50 for me just because I could see it either way. But I will pick Alex Pereira to get this one done via KO. I think Magomed's good. Don't get me wrong. I actually think he's very good. And he's a southpaw too, which we know Alex doesn't like fighting southpaws very much, as we saw in the Khalil fight. But I think that Magomed isn't going to be able to do as much on the feet as some people think. Granted, Magomed is a striker, and he is very good on the feet. So I think the notion that people are saying, well, if Magomed stands with Alex the whole time, he's just going to get knocked out immediately and destroyed. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think he'll have some success on the feet. That being said, we know how susceptible he is to leg kicks, and Alex Pereira is like the best leg kicker in the division. He has some brutal calf kicks, and he's very good at not making it obvious when he's throwing them. So I definitely could see Alex Pereira, chopping down those legs. And don't get me wrong, Magomed Ankalaev's wrestling is very good. He is a striker, which a lot of people confuse him as like a Dagestani wrestler, but his main game is striking, but he does have good wrestling. That being said, Alex Pereira has most likely been working on his grappling every day since the Jan Blachowicz fight. And that fight, it exposed his grappling, and I just think he's probably made some improvements. We haven't really seen a showcase of his grappling since UFC 295 last year, because since then, against Khalil, against Jamal, and in the Yuri rematch, he's just beat all of them on the feet and knocked them out with no grappling that ever got involved. So I think even though we haven't seen it firsthand, I think his grappling improvements definitely have happened. So I don't think it's going to be as easy as Magomed just takes down Pereira easily and then just beats him. You know what I mean? And I think Magomed doesn't really submit people. Granted, maybe he takes him down and TKOs him on the ground, but even then I don't see it because Alex is defensively responsible when he does get taken down, making sure to get the grips on the arms so that it's not as easy for them to ground and pound there. And I think on the feet, Magomed is going to be struggling because although you could see him just sort of pressuring forward and attacking Alex in the pocket and trying to land some good punches and stay out of reach of, his left hook, I think the leg kicks are going to deter him. Early on, I think Magomed's going to have a lot of success, but as the fight builds and as he gets leg kicked a lot more, I think he's going to struggle more and more on the feet, and then at that point, he's just asking to get caught. So I think Alex Pereira could get this done. Now, the key for Magomed, if he wants to win this, is to grapple at least a little bit. Obviously, we've seen this stuff saying that he's only going to stand with Alex Pereira and knock him out on the feet. And I'm not going to say, there's no chance of that happening. He's very good on the feet. But there's not a very high chance of him winning that. I don't think that's his best path to victory. I think what he needs to do is grapple and get Alex thinking about the takedowns. Because if Alex is thinking about the takedowns, I think Magomed's going to have more success on the feet, and I think he'll be able to win sort of under those circumstances. That being said, I think Alex Pereira's grappling improvements are going to be good enough that the grappling isn't going to, destroy him if Magomed does decide to shoot some takedowns. And I think on the feet, those leg kicks are just going to put in work. And I think if Magomed gets caught once, by a big left hook or something, we know how powerful Alex is. I think Alex will be able to put him down really easily then and finish him. I could even see Magomed, getting pieced up on the feet and shoot sort of a panic takedown after getting hurt badly and then getting kneed in the face and knocked out that way. As much as it is kind of crazy to pick a flying knee KO, I could actually see that from Alex. So I think this is a very close fight because there is some path to victories for Magomed if he decides to grapple offensively early in the fight and get Alex thinking about that and, switch it up a lot, mix it up. Because I think he's definitely going to have some success on the feet. But I think he's not going to grapple immediately. I think he is actually going to try to stay on the feet for a while early on in the fight. And I think that's going to lend its advantage to Alex because he's going to just look better early. And I think those leg kicks are going to allow him to sort of compromise Magomed later into the fight. So I think I'm going to pick Alex by KO here after round 1. I could see it round 2 potentially, but most likely it's going to be like a round 3 or 4 KO. Alex does get better as the fight goes on, in my opinion. And Magomed has good cardio too, but I think I have to go Alex here just because I think the striking difference is going to make Alex, look better. And I think he has that experience fighting southpaws now. I think he got more used to Khalil being a southpaw, and he's definitely been training that way for Ankalaev now that he knows that he might try to capitalize off of those mistakes. So I think Alex Pereira is going to win this fight. But don't be completely shocked if Magomed wins it, because I definitely see a world, because there's a very clear path to victory here where if he just wrestles enough and Alex Pereira's grappling improvements aren't enough, that he could win. I'm sort of basing my pick off of the fact that Magomed isn't going to grapple as much as he should, and I'm basing it off of the fact that I'm just going to assume that Alex has made some grappling improvements just to his defensive grappling. So I will pick Alex here, but like I said, Magomed definitely has a very good chance of getting it done. That's why this fight's like an almost 50-50 fight. But let's say Magomed does win. That actually shakes things up in the division, so that too would be exciting. We could potentially see Yuri get a title shot from there. We could see an immediate rematch. So, yeah. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure to vote in my poll. Tell me who you think's going to win in this main event. And, yeah, I'm excited for this card. We'll see after the card how my picks are. I'm hoping to redeem myself after, last week's picks where I went 5-4. So hopefully I do a lot better than that one. But, yep. So if you guys have any questions or if you want to put your picks in the comments, go ahead. I'll see you guys in the next video.